Hello everybody, my name is JoyofCrimeArt, and as 2021 winds to a close, I think many of us out there are using this as an opportunity to look back and reflect on the things that have happened to us over the past year. And while this has definitely been a wild year in its own right in a global and political sense, I want to talk about something a little bit lighter, like for instance animation. Because with a year as crazy as 2021, I think we could all use a little bit of escapism. And 2021 has been a pretty interesting year for the medium of animation as a whole, with a lot of good and a lot of bad. But how did the year turn out as a whole? Well, that's why I'm here to find out. That's why today I'm going to look back at 2021 animation, running through the various new series, seasons, pieces of news, whatever. As long as it seems interesting and relevant to me, it's on the table. However, I will be excluding theatrical animation and anime from this list, because this video is long enough as it is. We'll just be mainly focusing on the world of broadcast television and streaming. And hey, for added fun, at the end I'll rank everything I talk about from worst to best, give the year an overall grade, and decide which network or streaming service quote-unquote won the year. But before we begin, just keep in mind that there might be some stuff that I miss, as it would be impossible for me to talk about everything. And also keep in mind that this is just all my personal opinion. So with all that said, let's dive in.
Okay, so I'm gonna form a team of the best heroes on Earth.
The year started out with a bang with the release of Kid Cosmic on Netflix. Created by Craig McCracken, a titan of the animation world known for creating series like The Powerpuff Girls, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and Wander Over Yonder. The series follows a young kid named Kid, who ends up accidentally discovering 5 cosmic stones of power that grants anyone who wields them various superpowers. Now Kid, alongside a group of other ragtag misfits, must use their newfound powers to protect the galaxy from all kinds of alien threats who all want the stones for themselves. One thing that really sticks out to me with the show is the art style. Something I've always really admired about Craig McCracken's work is how each show manages to look very distinct from one another, and this series is no exception. It takes on this very rough 50s comic book style that matches the general tone of the series just perfectly. The animation itself can be a bit choppy at points, but I think that's an intentional stylistic decision. The characters are fine for the most part. Kid's a good-natured, if not somewhat bratty child character, though I'd be lying if I said his brattiness didn't get a little old at certain points, with him being more focused on being taken seriously and acting cool instead of acting like a real hero. And that's fine early on in the series, since that does feel in line with how a kid his age probably would act if they got superpowers out of the blue. But he doesn't really grow out of it, or at least not so far. But he's not a bad character by any means. He's pretty well-intentioned, always wanting to do the right thing, which helps keep him from being too unlikable. However, starting with Season 2, the series changes focus to be less about the kid and more about Joe, the snarky but well-meaning teenage member of the team. I like Joe, and the arc she has in the show's second season about learning how to be a better leader is good. But it does seem a little weird to me that the show called Kid Cosmic really starts focusing on Kid halfway through. It'd work better if it worked for more of a Teen Titans approach where each season focuses on a different member of the team, but we know this show's only going to have 3 seasons and the team has more than 3 members, resulting in the cast outside of Kid and Joe feeling a little underdeveloped by comparison. I mean, they pretty much got rid of Stuckchuck's screen time in the second season despite him being the objective best character in the show, but it's not like I'm upset or anything. There are parts of the show that feel a little bit out of touch. Like a major theme in the show's first season is that problems don't always have to be solved with violence, and that even bad guys can change for the better. The show kind of treats it like it's a big subversion of the superhero formula. Have you seen any cartoons that came out in the last decade? I also feel like some of the characters are a bit too similar to characters from Craig McCracken's previous work. Like, they're not carbon copies, but it's pretty easy to make connection between, say, Joe and Frankie or Grandpa G and Wander. Heck, the Powerpuff Girls just show up in the Season 2 finale and... Wait. Is Buttercup black? Does that mean the Powerpuff Girls CW show is canon? The show also has some weird pacing problems. Episodes tend to either feel drawn out or too rushed, which is odd since being a Netflix show allows the crew to make episodes whatever length they need them to be. I do appreciate the fact that being on Netflix, the show can get away with a lot more than you probably would be able to get away with on your average television network, with things like light swearing and actual named characters being killed on screen by our villains. I admire Craig McCracken's ability to make villains who are usually played off with a joke still a threat when they need to be. Overall, I like Kid Cosmic. But I think the show has a few wrinkles that stops it from being as good as some of the other story-driven kid shows out there, but still plenty enjoyable and worth checking out if you're a fan of Craig McCracken's other work.
When nature's calling, you'll see me hauling, I'm hitting the trail.
Oh, you stink!
Meanwhile this year, CBS All Access rebranded itself to the much catchier but much more boring title of Paramount Plus, and celebrated the rebrand with the premiere of several new shows, including Camp Koral, the first of many Spongebob spin-off series. And the reaction online was... heated to say the least, with many people writing the series off before it even aired or even refusing to watch the series. But why all the hate? Well, there are a few reasons, one of which being that many people believe that SpongeBob's original creator, Stephen Hillenburg, who passed away in 2018 from ALS, wouldn't have wanted the series, and Nickelodeon waited for him to die to make it. The main evidence of this is due to an old interview Stephen Hillenburg did, where he supposedly said that he was against the idea of SpongeBob spin-offs. Not helping were several people who had worked with Stephen Hillenburg saying that he would be against the idea. So obviously there's a lot to unpack here. First, the interview. It is true that he said he was against the idea of SpongeBob spin-offs, but if you read the interview, the reason he said he was against the spin-offs in the first place was because he didn't feel like any character other than SpongeBob could carry the show on their own. And Camp Koral still stars SpongeBob. So if anything, people should be more upset about the Patrick Star Show, the other spin-off that came out this year. However, despite this series came out first, so it got the brunt of the hate. Also keep in mind this interview came out in 2009, so entirely possible he could have just changed his mind at some point. And while some staff members did say he was against the reboot, others involved with the series production said that Stephen Hillenburg knew about the series prior to his death and gave it his blessing, so it's a bit of a he said she said situation. So did Nickelodeon really wait for him to die just so they can announce these spin-offs? I don't think so. Nickelodeon owns the SpongeBob IP and they can do what they want with it. They didn't need Stephen Hillenburg's approval for anything. Like, if Stephen Hillenburg didn't die, do you really think Nickelodeon would have done something like this eventually? Remember, Stephen Hillenburg wanted SpongeBob to end after the first movie, and that didn't stop Nickelodeon from continuing the show. This happened to be a case of really bad timing, as Stephen Hillenburg's death just happened to occur around the time Nickelodeon got a new CEO, Brian Robbins, who seems to be really big into the idea of spin-offs and reboots in general. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the discourse has gotten kind of overblown in sort of a parasocial relationship-y kind of way. Like, I completely understand if the idea of a SpongeBob spin-off series so close to the creator's death feels a bit scummy to you. And if you decide not to watch the series because of that, that's your choice. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, we'll never know 100% what Stephen Hillenburg's thoughts on the reboot were. The amount of people online talking about what Stephen Hillenburg would have wanted as if they knew the guy just feels weird to me. Like, I feel like a lot of people care more about what Stephen Hillenburg would have thought about the series rather than what they think about the series. And I spend so much time talking about this because honestly the show isn't very good and it doesn't really give me a whole lot to talk about. Yet just because I defend the show's right to exist doesn't mean I have to think it's good. The problem really isn't the concept itself. The series follows SpongeBob and co as kids attending a summer camp, even though that contradicts other episodes of the original show where we see characters meeting for the first time as adults, but whatever. The main issue is that aging the characters down doesn't really create a whole lot of new story opportunities because characters like SpongeBob already act like a child. So all you've really done is take away story opportunities instead of adding them. Despite the series being set at a summer camp, the setting doesn't really add all that much. A lot of these plots could still be done in the regular show. If I had to say a few positives, I kinda like how Sandy's been given more spotlight. She has a good dynamic with SpongeBob and Patrick, so it's kind of nice seeing her go from side character to main character. I also like some of the new characters like Nobby and Arlene, these two mischievous hillbilly narwhals who act as a bad influence to our leads, spurring them into mischief they otherwise wouldn't get themselves into. But again, there's nothing about them that really feels necessary for them to be in this series. They could easily be introduced in the original series and work just as well, which they eventually ended up doing. The animation is also okay. It manages to be fairly expressive, but it just makes the series color scheme feel fairly dark and drab. I think it might be because it's supposed to be set in a forest, but it does make the series look a little bit washed out. Yeah, in all honesty, I really just didn't get into this show. Perhaps it's because I'm never that big of a SpongeBob fan outside of the first few seasons. The show isn't that bad, it's just incredibly average. The series dropped with 6 episodes initially, and I can only be bothered to watch 4. The series just doesn't do enough to stand out from the original to justify watching it over the original. If you're a big SpongeBob fan and aren't turned off by all the Stephen Hillenburg controversy, you'll probably like it fine, but I doubt you'll like it more than the original series. For everyone else, just watch Camp Lazlo. That show's already basically the SpongeBob in camp anyway.
Land over there. Slow down. Land. I said land.
I can't!
Stop. Just stop.
In terms of animation, Amazon Prime Video has never been one of the larger contenders out there. Sure, they've had animated shows before, but none that anyone ever really talked about. But all that changed this year when Amazon Prime released their adult animated series based on the comic book series by Robert Kirkman, the man behind the Walking Dead comics. The series follows young Mark Grayson, the son of the most powerful superhero in the world, Omni-Man. Mark, after discovering that he too has powers, decides he wants to follow in his father's footsteps, becoming the superhero Stop that! Going into this series, I was expecting this to be your typical dark and gritty superhero deconstruction. And while it may appear that way on the surface, I don't think it really is. I mean, yeah, the series is dark and violent, but the series isn't really deconstructing all that much. If you were to take away the blood and F-bombs, it wouldn't be that different from your standard superhero story, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, it's tropey, but the tropes I enjoy and haven't seen in a while due to the overall decline of action cartoons, making the series feel almost nostalgic in a way. I really appreciate how, despite how dark the series is, the world they live in is still really goofy. It's kind of refreshing when compared to a lot of other more mature takes on the superhero genre, plus it's just nice having more action cartoons for adults out there. Mark is a likable character. He's basically a slightly less nerdy Spider-Man with Superman's powers. I really feel for him as pretty much everything in his life goes downhill for him. Because despite his powers, he is really bad at his job. You got your standard superhero drama, trying to balance civilian life with your superhero life, love triangles, that sort of things. And speaking of love triangles, I know I'm not the first to say this, but I agree with pretty much everyone else. Amber is kind of the worst, and Mark should end up with Eve instead. Like, Amber finds out that Mark's a superhero and gets all upset that he didn't tell her, despite them only dating for like 6 months at most. So she knows he has a good excuse for missing out on their dates or whatever, but still gets mad and makes herself the victim. Even though Mark's out there literally risking his life to save people. I don't hate her as much as a lot of fans do, but yeah, Eve is way better. While that's going on, I also follow this subplot about trying to find out who murdered this universe's version of the Justice League. With us, the audience, knowing that the murderer was actually Mark's father, Omni-Man. What? A version of Superman who's evil? That's not how Superman's supposed to work. To be fair, the series is based on older comics, so maybe the idea was more novel back then. The murder mystery stuff is good, but it does feel like it kind of drags on since we, the audience, already know that Omni-Man did it and have to spend half the season waiting for other characters to catch up. That said, I do like Omni-Man. He's able to go off with this very threatening presence and one scene to be very charming the next, helped by a great performance by J.K. Simmons. Though, I don't know, given the way he acts in some scenes, it kind of feels like characters should have realized this guy was a sociopath a bit earlier. The pacing of the show is also kind of weird in general. The show is 44-minute episodes, which is rare for an animated series. But it sometimes feels like episodes will be about one thing, and then the episode will be about something different halfway through because they needed to fill out the runtime. The series had a lot of ongoing subplots, and while it does help make the world feel larger, a lot of the time they feel very disconnected from Mark and his story. Also, it's a minor nitpick, but I'm not personally a big fan of just how blatantly some of the superheroes in this world are just XPs of popular DC and Marvel comic characters. I know superhero shows like this often have parodies and homages to popular superhero characters, but I don't know, do you have to make it this obvious? But those flaws aren't enough to kill the series for me. Overall, I really enjoyed the show. I do think it has some problems, but it's still a lot of fun. And if you have Amazon Prime Video, I suggest giving the Boys the Animated Series a shot. Infinity Train aired its final season this year with Book 4, Duet. And honestly, I think it might be my favorite season so far. The series follows two young musicians, McGee and Ryan, who have to work together to reverse everyone's favorite evil demonic death train while confronting the various issues that caused their friendship to drift apart over the years. McGee and Ryan are both really good characters who are given a lot of nuance. I like how the reason that they grew apart isn't just because of one thing, and it isn't one of them who's wholly at fault. Both are flawed individuals who need to grow as people first before they're able to grow together as friends. And Kaz might be one of my favorite companions yet. I found her kind of annoying at first, but the series does this on purpose and works it into her development. I also really appreciate the season having a bit of a lighter tone compared to Book 3 and even Book 2 to a lesser extent. I know people like Infinity Train for its darker tone, and I do too. But I do feel like the series went a little bit too far with it, especially during Book 3. Like early on in Book 1, the train was threatening, but there was also a sense of wonder and whimsy to it. And I think some of that whimsy is lost when you get too dark. But I think this season strikes the right balance. Setting it in the late 80s, early 90s is a really nice touch, allowing us to get some backstory on the train without it feeling too overbearing to the plot, because the focus always stays where it should be, on the two main characters and their relationship. I know a lot of people online are upset about this being the last season, especially since the creator, Owen Dennis, said they had an 8-season plan for the series. And yeah, I'd love this series to continue, but as is, I feel satisfied. I think the fact that the series is an anthology helps make this cancellation sting a bit less for me, since each book stands on its own, even if there are plot threads still left hanging. And I can't say I don't understand why the series got the axe. At the end of the day, Cartoonito is a production company that is primarily focused on making shows aimed at kids. And Infinity Train is much more of a niche series aimed at a much older audience, with scenes that would probably terrify most kids and topics they probably wouldn't be able to relate to. It honestly feels like a miracle this show lasted as long as it did. But I'm not so sure if we've really seen the end of the series. I could easily see this show getting picked up for some kind of continuation a few years down the line once the nostalgia kicks in, given how large its fan base is. But if that doesn't happen, at least the series went out on a high note. But seriously, why didn't the season end with McGee and Ryan getting together? Like, seriously, the whole season was hinting at it, and why aren't you gay?!
You are hereby relieved of your status as CPA Supreme and as a living person!
I still need to do your personal taxes.
I'm sorry. I thought this coffee was for everyone.
Hulu gave us M.O.D.O.K this year, based on the Marvel comic character that I don't really know anything about, so I'll be judging this series from an outsider's perspective. The series follows the day-to-day life of M.O.D.O.K, a low-tier supervillain that nobody seems to respect. The series deals with M.O.D.O.K's struggles both at the office as his mad scientist company AIM gets bought out by knockoff Google, and his problems at home as he has to deal with his divorce and learn how to be a better father to his 2 kids. I would describe the series as American Dad meets Harley Quinn, though it does definitely feel more adult animated sitcom than it does superhero show, but it does have a few more dramatic moments later on as the series' multiple ongoing subplots all come to a head. The show is animated in stop motion, done by the people who animated Robot Chicken. It's an odd choice, but I think it looks pretty good. The fact that everything on screen was made with puppets is really impressive. The biggest issue with the series is M.O.D.O.K himself. He's pretty unlikable, especially early on, not in your standard supervillain way, but more in a typical adult animated sitcom dad kind of way. The sitcom dad who's insensitive and ignorant to his family's feeling trope just feels very overdone at this point, and the series doesn't really do anything new with the concept. However, he does improve a bit as the series goes on. Also, if I had any other issues, I would say that some of the series' ongoing subplots don't really go anywhere, and the season ends on a cliffhanger that kind of felt out of left field. Do I recommend the series? I think it depends on who you are. It's not really doing anything that new, and there's definitely a lot of better series out there, but for every joke that fails, there's one that works. I don't know how accurately this captures the tone of M.O.D.O.K from the comics, but from an outside looking in, it's not a bad watch. Rick Sanchez was added to Fortnite. I don't really have anything to say about it, I just thought it was funny.
He's just a boy! And that boy is holding all the power of the universe in his bare hands! That power is mine!
Back on the Netflix front, we got Master of the Universe Revelations, a sequel to the original 1980s He-Man cartoon. It's hard to talk about the series without going into some background. So back in 2018, Netflix released She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, a reboot of the 80s She-Ra show that was a very different take on the franchise. A lot of characters got updated designs, backstories, and personalities, with the series putting a lot of emphasis on diversity in terms of body types, ethnicities, and making every character really, really gay. Now overall, I like She-Ra, even if it did have some problems. But keep in mind, I was an outsider who knew nothing about She-Ra prior. But the point is, that series was divisive to say the least. A lot of people hated it for being quote-unquote SJW propaganda, but many others simply disliked it for being so different from the series that they loved in the first place, and wished for an adaptation that'd be closer to the source material, which I think is understandable. I bring all that up because a lot of people who hated She-Ra were excited when the word got out about Master of the Universe Revelation, a direct sequel to the original 80s He-Man show in a pseudo-anime art style that would tackle darker themes and be aimed at an older audience who grew up with the original series. It was shaping up to be everything that She-Ra wasn't. People were hyped. I mean, it's not like Netflix would mess up twice, right? So the series starts out with He-Man and Skeletor being killed off in the first episode. After that, we follow Teela, He-Man's female companion who travels around the land of Eternia stopping bad guys with her new, muscular, BIPOC traveling companion, whom she shares a very intimate relationship with, and... Wait a minute. No! You were the chosen one! You were supposed to destroy the limbs, not join them! Yeah, I think it's clear that the series wasn't what a lot of people were expecting it to be. It's kind of a messy situation. You see a lot of people who defend the series call out the people who dislike it, saying that they're all just a bunch of sexist man-babies who can't handle a show starring a girl instead of their precious He-Man. And yeah, sure, there are a lot of people like that out there. But on the other hand, a lot of the press leading up to the release of the series went out of its way to market itself as a He-Man show. So you can't really blame fans who are expecting a He-Man show to not be upset when they kill He-Man off in the very first episode and make a show about Teela instead. But on the other hand, it's not like the crew behind the show could really be upfront about what the series was really like either. He-Man dying was supposed to come off as this shocking moment. If they came out and say, oh yeah, the show's really more about Teela, it would have ruined the surprise. They tried to hint at it the best they could by calling the show Master of the Universe and not He-Man Master of the Universe, but the damage was already done. Look, I think we just have to come to terms with the fact that we're never going to get a He-Man series as based as the original. We just have to accept it and try to move on.
She's fainted.
Just like a woman.
But controversy aside, how is the series on its own? Well, one thing I really like about the series is the scale, as they try to do everything they can to make the series feel as grand and epic as possible. The conflict presented in the first episode with He-Man having to destroy the magic of Eternia in order to stop Skeletor from stealing it is literally the same conflict the 2018 She-Ra series had for its series finale. And the story just keeps escalating from there. It's She-Ra, Bad Ending Edition. It's cool seeing Eternia having to deal with a world lacking both He-Man and magic. It has a sort of post-apocalyptic vibe with the good guys and bad guys having to work together just to survive. It is kind of gutsy the way the show is willing to kill off so many well-established characters, and I felt for a lot of their deaths. That said, despite the darker tone, the series never goes too dark, which I think is a good thing. Because let's be honest, the first series was pretty cheesy, so if this series took itself too seriously, it would be a little bit odd. I think the series managed to find a good balance. That said, however, there are some bad elements. I'm not the biggest fan of Teela as a character. She's not that fun of a character to follow, as a lot of her time is spent brooding about He-Man didn't tell her about his secret identity, even though He-Man didn't tell most people about his secret identity. Like, she really makes herself the victim, even after the guy just died trying to save the world. Also, I'm not the biggest fan of how the series ended up bringing He-Man back to life halfway through. Like, especially to tick people off, at least killing He-Man off in episode 1 was ballsy. Bringing it back just kind of cheapens it a bit. I will admit though, I was only able to watch the first half of the season before doing this review, but hey, that's what Netflix decided to release at launch, so I think it's fair to use that as a first impressions. I don't know what happens in the second half of the season, or what the general consensus about it is, but based on the first half, I'd say the series has more good than bad. But that's coming from a non-He-Man fan. I do get why fans of the original series would be upset about some of the choices made here, but I had a pretty good time with this show.
I would like a treat. I would like a treat. The Queen would like a treat.
Excuse me, do you have any tea that doesn't taste like piss? Thanks.
HBO Max released The Prince this year, whether we like it or not. I did not consent to this. The series follows the quote-unquote hilarious misadventures of the young Prince George and the rest of the British royal family we all know and love. You know, it must be weird being the real Prince George to know that there's an anime cartoon all about you, but you're not old enough to watch it yet because you're 8. Or alternatively, maybe he's unaware the show exists, and one day he's just gonna stumble upon it when he's older and be very confused. Yeah, normally I just have to talk about if a show is good or not, but it's a much rarer case where I have to discuss if the series is even ethical. And that's happened twice this year. Like, you can make a show about whatever you want, I guess, but it does feel a little, I don't know, mean, I guess? To have a series basically making fun of the real-life child, who, as far as I can tell, has done nothing wrong outside of being born into a rich family. I mean, give our cartoon president this, at least they had the decency to keep Barron Trump out of the show. In this series' defense, though, it does make it clear that these are intended to be parodies of the royal family, and none of the jokes really come off as, like, personal attacks or anything. But still, it feels kind of in poor taste. But that aside, how is the show? Well, let's start with the characters. Prince George's personality is pretty much what you would expect from a show like this. He's basically just Alan Gregory or Stewie Griffin, which makes sense as the show was made by people who worked on Family Guy. And he just comes off as very unlikable most of the time. He's depicted as egotistical, rude to everyone around him, and generally unaware of how the world sees him. The rest of the royal family isn't much better. They're all just basically one joke for the most part. And if you're not super knowledgeable about the British royal family, it can be hard to remember how everyone's supposed to be related to each other. The show doesn't really take the time to introduce a lot of the characters, just expect you to know the source material going in. The animation style of the show isn't very good either. The main members of the royal family are all drawn in this sort of caricature, political newspaper comics sort of style. I'm not crazy about how it looks, but I will say it does at least match the tone the series is trying to go for, but all the side characters look like the standard Family Guy art style. It is very interesting to look at visually. The show's jokes tend to flop more than they land. Like, I'm not saying there were no funny jokes, but there were pretty few and far between. But where it really baffled me about the show was the writing. Several episodes just straight up do not have conflict. Like, at all. It's really hard to explain without watching it for yourself, but not much actually happens in this show. It's mostly characters just kind of standing around talking, which can work for a series, but it doesn't really work here. But there has to be something good about this show, right? Well, believe it or not, the show actually does pick up a bit near the end, as various ongoing subplots begin to all come together. There's this sort of Battle for Succession Game of Thrones stuff going on with the adult characters, and we even get some character exploration into Prince George, as he begins to question if anyone actually likes him for who he is, or if they're only pretending to like him because of his status. The only person who seems to actually treat George like an actual person instead of the prince is his butler, Owen, who acts as a pseudo-parental figure. I like Owen. He's one of the few consistently good characters in this show. And he has a very touching backstory that helps show why Owen treats George the way that he does. I don't know, it ended up being a bit more endearing than I was expecting it to be. But it has enough to redeem the series? It's hard to say. The show still probably has more bad in it than good. But just because a show is bad on the whole doesn't mean it can't have some nuggets of quality buried deep within it. The show ended on a cliffhanger, and honestly, I kinda wouldn't mind if the show got a second season. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least curious to see where the story would go. And if the last few episodes are any indication, maybe it could improve and become something good. Though I'm not sure if I can really recommend the show either.
You saved me!
It's what we do, for we are the doctors of Jellystone Hospital.
Also, here's your bill for $10,000.
HBO Max also gave us Jellystone, a slice-of-life comedy following the different classic Hanna-Barbera characters within the town of Jellystone. One thing I like about the series is that it's sort of ensemble cast, as not every episode follows the same batch of characters. It's not something you see very often, it allows for a lot of different story potentials. Of course, the downside to that is that with so many main characters, you might not like them all equally. Some characters I really like Augie Doggy, Yankee Doodle, Shagrat. What are these names? Some characters I really like Augie Doggy, Yankee Doodle, Shagrug, Top Cat's Gang, but others I wasn't so into. Like Yogi Bear I personally found kind of annoying, despite the show being called Jellystone and him probably being the most recognizable character featured. Still, it's nice seeing a lot of these older Hanna-Barbera characters get some acknowledgement. It's not just the popular ones either, they go kind of deep into their library and pull out some more obscure choices. The show's comedy and writing is okay. It's not something super complex or anything, but it's fine. The show was made by C.H. Greenblatt, who created Chowder and Harvey Beaks. The show kind of feels like an in-between between those two in terms of tone and style. If you're a die-hard Hanna-Barbera fan, you'll probably get a kick out of all the little nods and references the show has to the source material, though you may be turned off by some of the changes. Nearly half the cast have been gender swapped, due to the old Hanna-Barbera shows being fairly male-centric while this crew wanted the series to be more gender-balanced. It's a change that I understand, but some of the other changes feel kind of random. Jabberjaw is a valley girl now, and Peter Ponemus is a dirty weeb. Johnny Quest and Haji are married, even though they were more like adopted brothers in the original series. The Great Gazoo is a computer virus instead of an alien, and German now instead of British. I don't know, it just feels kind of strange. Like, the gender thing makes sense, I see why they would do that. But a lot of these other changes feel arbitrary. I feel like you could almost make the show without using any of the Hanna-Barbera likenesses, and the show wouldn't be all that different. While Jellystones may not be the greatest show ever, it's so innocent and inoffensive that there isn't really much to dislike about it. The type of show that you can have on in the background that did introduce me to a lot of classic Hanna-Barbera characters that I may not have cared about otherwise. It is nice that a newer generation of kids will be introduced to these characters too.
I'm sorry, but who are you?
Oh, ha! Forgive me. I'm Angus, the groundskeeper here at Loud Castle, and I welcome you to your ancestral home.
The Loud House movie premiered this year on Netflix. The film centers around Lincoln, who becomes insecure about how each of his sisters have some unique thing that they excel at, while he's stuck being the generic white boy. So he comes up with a plan for his family to travel to Scotland to find his family roots, and hopefully find himself in the process as well. Now, upon arriving in Scotland, Loud discovers that they're actually descendants of the Scottish royal family, and the movie just kind of gets weirder from there. Like, there's ghosts and a dragon and a gem that controls the dragon, and like, I'm not the biggest Loud House fan out there. I know the Loud House has always been a bit of an exaggerated reality, but has this series ever had anything this blatantly fantastical in it before? The film is a musical, and I think it does a good job at that. Most of the songs are done in this very modern pop style, which might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I found them pretty catchy. The animation is also a bit of a step up from the series, which is nice. The one thing that may throw off some fans of the movie is pretty much a Lincoln movie. The rest of the siblings don't really get a whole lot of screen time except for maybe Lucy. I know juggling 13 characters in a movie could be difficult, but part of the fun of Loud House is seeing all the different family members play off each other. I feel like the theme of the importance of family and a role within it would have maybe come off a bit stronger if we got to actually see more of the actual family. I also don't really like how we see the ancestors of Louds and they're basically just the Louds in old-timey clothing. It just feels a bit uninspired. Also, this isn't really a complaint, but the zany supernatural stuff did throw me off a bit. Like, it's hard to take this film seriously when there's a magic gem that's used to control a fire-breathing dragon in this movie based on a slice-of-life cartoon. It kind of breaks the immersion. If you're a fan of The Loud House, I think you'll really enjoy this film. If you're not a fan of the series, you may still enjoy it too. But I don't think it'll really blow you away or anything if you're not a fan of the source material. 2021 was a big year for Cartoon Network as the channel got a new president last year in Tom Ashen. But it wasn't until this year that we really got to see what the network would be like under his leadership. For some background, he had some previous work on the TV channel Noggin, as well as being one of the main people behind transforming ABC Family into Freeform. So he's mainly known for taking a preschool network and taking a network that was primarily for families and aiming it at a much older audience. And knowing that, a lot of the stuff that Cartoon Network did this year is starting to make a whole lot more sense. First was the launch of Cartoonito, a preschool block designed to compete with the likes of Nick Jr. and Disney Jr. This isn't the first time Cartoon Network has done something like this, as they did have Tickle You back in the mid-2000s, but you could say this was the first time they actually, tried. They've been really pushing this block, doing cross-promotion on HBO Max, and all just really hyping it up. I'm going to show my personal bias here, and will admit that I was not the biggest fan of this when it was first announced. And that's because, obviously, these shows are way outside my demographic. I mean, I know all these shows are outside my demographic, but you know what I mean. Like, it was kind of nice having one network as an option for non-educational animated series on weekday mornings, Also, upon the block's launch, Cartoonito was running from 6 AM to 2 PM. That's 8 hours, which is a long time, especially since Cartoon Network already has to share its time with Adult Swim. Heck, Cartoonito was longer than Cartoon Network at its launch. It seemed like a bit of a drastic decision considering that the last time Cartoon Network tried something like this, it bombed hard. However, they did end up shortening the block to help make things a little more balanced with Cartoon Network, which I do appreciate. I get why Cartoon Network is doing this. I mean, all the other channels have done stuff like this and they've had tremendous success with it. And Cartoon Network is a network aimed at kids, so it makes sense they would want to appeal to all kids of all age groups. I don't think it's wrong for Cartoon Network to be doing this, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't prefer if they did it for my own personal selfish reasons. I don't want to watch shows aimed at kids 2 to 7, I want to watch shows aimed at kids 7 to 12! However, just because Cartoon Network was trying to aim at a younger audience doesn't mean that they weren't also trying to appeal to older fans too, as they also launched Acme Night, a block of movies and programming aimed at a more family audience. First, this one gets off my chest, Acme Night is a horrible name. The block has nothing to do with the Looney Tunes, and the 80s outrun aesthetic just doesn't scream Acme to me. Also, I keep accidentally calling it Acme Night. But name aside, the block airs movies aimed at a slightly older audience. Sure, you would still get stuff that they would normally air on Cartoon Network, like the Lego Movie and stuff like that, but you also got stuff like DCEU films, the 90s Ninja Turtle films, Ready Player One, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, among other things. When it comes to films, it always felt like Children's Network tend to get the short end of the stick. Like before Acme Night came around, Cartoon Network's film library was primarily made up of Scooby-Doo direct-to-video films and the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies played on loop. But now they're actually airing blockbusters, and it's kind of cool to see. Though some of the content they air after the movies as filler is kind of weird, it's just kind of disturbing to me that Family Matters has aired on Cartoon Network, But I guess it's just something I'll have to learn to accept. It goes to show how this block is really aimed at more families, not just kids. Earlier this year, Cartoon Network changed its motto. It went from on your Cartoon Network to on everyone's Cartoon Network. I think that really defines what Cartoon Network is trying to be under Tom Ash Ketchum's leadership. A channel for everybody. Toddlers, kids, families, and adults. I don't know how successful they'll be in the long run, as trying to appeal to everyone can often end up making you appeal to no one. But so far, it seems to be doing well. Also, I don't have cable anymore, so I guess I really shouldn't care now, should I? But I do care. Because Cartoon Network has played a big part of my life, and even if I can't watch the channel, I still want it to succeed. It may be a bit of a mixed bag, but I do admire the experimentation of it all. It also reminds me of the Stu Snyder era in a way, where things felt very experimental, even if not all those experiments were necessarily good. But it wasn't just Cartoon Network that was mixing things. As changes were also happening on the Adult Swim front as well. Adult Swim lost the race to Family Guy after 18 years, and while, again, I don't have cable, it was still a sad sight to see. The show just felt linked to Adult Swim in a way. It was the success of reruns on Adult Swim that encouraged Fox to renew the series in the first place, creating one of their biggest hits. It was Family Guy's success in the ratings that allowed Adult Swim the security it needed to do more of the weird and experimental things that the channel became known for. Seeing them lose the series was a sad sight to see. Though they did get the rights to King of the Hill and Futurama back. Such is the law of equivalent exchange.
We can build the band shell ourselves. You know what? To cheer us up, let's go down in the park and make fun of babies. Little dummies can't even walk. I mean, why do they make shoes for them?
Disney released their newest series, The Ghost of Molly McGee. The series follows a young girl named Molly, played by Ashley Birch, who moves into a new house only to discover that the house was haunted by a ghost named Scratch, played by Dana Schneider. The two become eternally bonded to one another after a curse gone wrong, and the series follows the two as they're forced to adapt to their new situation and learn to get along while living under the same roof. Well, not living in Scratch case, but you get what I mean. I think a good place to start is with the character. Molly's your typical, hyperactive, fun-loving, ginky girl main character. You know, like Luz from the Owl House. Or Webby from DuckTales. Or Star from Star Versus. Or Mabel from Gravity Falls. Yeah, am I the one that's kind of getting sick of these characters in these shows? Like, in a vacuum, I don't mind this trope. I'm just kind of sick of seeing it in every cartoon Disney turns out. Some variety would be appreciated. Not topping is the fact that Molly comes off as kind of abrasive. Like, a lot of episodes have her coming up with the idea to help someone, which is commendable. But she has this habit of forcing others to go along with her ideas, or meddling into situations that don't really concern her. But not like she's an awful character or anything. We also have Scratch, who is basically every Dana Schneider character, and he's probably the best part of the show. He's lazy, mean, crude, and works as a great foil to Molly. Molly. The two honestly have pretty good chemistry with each other. Even if I do think that they did become friends kind of a bit fast, I feel like that would have worked better if that was like the season arc. They already kind of learned to like each other in the first couple episodes. The show also has a lot of songs, and they're honestly pretty catchy, but a lot of times I feel like they end before they're really able to get going. But I do get how it would be difficult to work songs into your show when each episode is only 11 minutes. Sure, Phineas and Ferb were able to do it, but that show had way more simple plots than this show. Also, this may sound weird, but I kind of enjoy the fact that this show, so far at least, doesn't seem to have much going for it in terms of ongoing narrative. Sure, there's a bit of continuity here or there, but mostly seems to be just your standard slice of life show, which is honestly kind of refreshing. Don't get me wrong, I like shows that do tell a larger and grander story, but I feel a bit burnt out on them, especially from Disney. It's nice having a show that's a little bit more simple. The show at the time of me writing this is still pretty new, so I don't really have that much to say on it yet. But it's a good show, albeit nothing that new or breathtaking, but still fun, and there's a good chance that the show will improve as time goes on and it finds its footing. It's definitely a series to keep your eye on.
Who are all these dudes?
And dudettes. Women can commit crime too.
You got that right.
Finally, some recognition.
And finally, to wrap up this year, we have Aquaman, King of Atlantis on HBO Max. Created by a lot of the people who worked on Thundercats Roar, this 3-part miniseries follows Aquaman as he tries to prove his worth to the people of Atlantis after being crowned their new king. If you saw Thundercats Roar from last year, Aquaman King of Atlantis is very similar to that in both art style and tone. The series sports the same distinctive art style, where things like bottle sheets and body proportions are merely suggestions. However, it does make for some very fluid animation and exaggerated facial expressions. It's not a style that will appeal to everyone, but I think it works for what the series is trying to do. Aquaman and his girlfriend Mara serve as the leads, and I think they're both really good characters and have general chemistry with each other. While the series is mostly goofy, there are a few serious moments that, while brief, do carry some weight due to having some pretty genuine, well-done voice acting. I also like how the series does go a bit deeper into Aquaman's lore than you often see in other adaptations. As in, the main villain isn't Black Manta. That generally surprised me. You get the feeling that the crew watching this show were genuinely Aquaman fans. The series is divided into 3 45-minute episodes while telling an overarching story. It's interesting how 45-minute cartoons were basically non-existent before 2021, and now there are 2 of them. And as bad as it sounds, I kind of think Aquaman King of Atlantis was better paced than Invincible was. The 3 episodes tell a complete story, though honestly I wouldn't mind if Warner Bros. Decided to make a second season of this show. It was a really fun show, and with characters with such a deep history as Aquaman, there's tons of potential for more stories to tell. If I had some complaints, however, it would be some of the elements don't really feel very consistent. Like in episode 1, we're told that Aquaman became king after defeating Ocean Master in royal combat, and it implies that no one really liked Ocean Master as king, but then episode 2 and 3 it's shown that most of the people did like Ocean Master as king and dislike Aquaman for defeating him. Also, a lot of the reasons the Atlanteans dislike Aquaman as king are kind of dumb, which I know is part of the joke, but it does make it feel a lot less rewarding at the end when Aquaman does earn his people's respect, since it didn't really feel like he had to grow that much to do so. The show isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea. If you didn't like Thundercats Roar, then I doubt the show is going to win you over, even though I do think it's a little bit better than Thundercats Roar. You can tell it's aimed at a younger audience than your typical superhero action shows, but as an action comedy aimed at younger kids, I actually ended up enjoying this more than I thought I would. And that was 2021 Year in Review in Animation. Obviously, there were tons of things I wasn't able to cover, but I can't watch everything, and this review is already plenty long as it is. Some observations? I noticed that while streaming services have been slowly taking over the animation landscape over the past few years, this feels like the year where it officially won. Out of all the shows I talked about, only one premiered on conventional television, the rest all came out on streaming services. And granted, there were shows that came out on television channels that I didn't talk about, but there weren't really shows everyone else was talking about. But now, the part that you've all been waiting for, how do all the things I talk about rank compared to one another? Well, if I had to place them all, I would probably go with something like this. Number 11, Camp Koral. Number 10, The Prince. Number 9, The Loud House Movie. Number 8, Jellystones. Number 7, M.O.D.O.K. Number 6, Kid Cosmic. Number 5, The Ghost of Molly McGee. Number 4, Aquaman, King of Atlantis. Number 3, Master of the Universe, Revelations. Number 2, Invincible. Number 1, Infinity Train, Book 4, Duet. But keep in mind, that's just my opinions at the time of writing this. I've never been good at rating things like this, as a lot of times it really does feel like you're comparing apples to oranges. So these shows can easily shift around as my opinion changes over time. Overall, 2021 honestly wasn't the strongest year of animation, at least in my opinion, which you know probably comes off as anticlimactic. Sure, there were lots of good shows, but there weren't any shows that really blew me away, so to speak. Even the series that I liked this year all had their fair share of problems. A lot of the other series that came out this year just felt okay or straight up bad. If I had to grade this year in a whole, I'd probably give it a C+. Not saying that there wasn't anything of value here, but things just felt a bit drier than in 2020. And granted, there were plenty of shows that came out this year that I heard good things about but wasn't able to watch. Shows like Star Trek, Prodigy, and Inside Job. But there were also plenty of shows that I heard bad things about that I wasn't able to watch. Q-Force, Chicago Party Ants, Santa Inc. And granted, those shows could be great for all I know, or maybe the shows that people say are great I wouldn't have liked. But even the shows I haven't watched, based on general reception, I think they even each other out. So I think giving the year a C+ overall makes the most sense. If I had to choose a channel or service that won the year, I would have to go with Amazon Prime for creating a show that managed to be both good and highly successful, proving that they too can be a contender in the battlegrounds of the modern animation landscape. Well, 2021 may not have been the best year for animation for me personally, that doesn't mean that 2022 doesn't have a chance to make up for it. And just because this year was kind of mid doesn't mean that it didn't have its highlights. But that's just my thoughts on the year. What do you guys think of 2021 in terms of animation? What shows do you think were the best or the worst? And what series did I miss? Leave all those thoughts in the comments down below. I genuinely would like to hear from you and know what you guys think. I'd also like to know what you guys think I could do to improve these videos. And if you like this video, feel free to like it, subscribe, and consider checking out my Patreon if you want more videos like this. It's pay by creation, so it's not much of a commitment. Have a great day.